Okay. Is everybody in? All right. Welcome, welcome. Hi, folks. We are so happy that you are joining us today. We're going to get started right on the nose. It's noon. By all means, many of you are probably cramming in food, maybe, in between meetings. That is all good. Do what you need to do to fuel your body and catch up, take a break, lean into the space, hopefully have a little fun. Just welcome to be here. My name is Stacy Wenzel, and I am one of several organizational change managers on this call on behalf of Liberum Consulting. We are a consulting firm, and we serve businesses, government, nonprofits, and we provide a variety of services, including business transformation, project management, and organizational change management, which is what we're here to explore with you all today. Super excited to be here. And so I want to take a chance to let my co-presenters and colleagues just introduce themselves quickly. And while they're doing that, if you can pop into the chat window, your name, your organization, and role in the chat, that would be great. So we can get a flavor of who's in the room, and you guys can maybe connect afterwards if you hear something of interest from up here in the room. I'm going to hand it over to Samantha.
Hello, everybody. I'm Samantha Trotter. I'm a senior organizational change management OCM consultant with Liberum and also a client engagement director. I'm really happy to see you all here. Reagan, do you want to go?
Oh, couldn't get off mute. Yes, Reagan Caldwell. Happy to be here with you today. Also a consultant here at Liberum in OCM. So yes, good to meet you.
And
Olivia. Yeah. Say hi, Olivia.
Hello, I'm Olivia Kay, also a consultant here at Liberum. Excited to see this presentation and get everybody's thoughts and have everybody interact with it. It'll be fun.
Cool. Let's see who we have in the chat window. Let's see. Jason's here from Liberum. Yay, Jason's on the team. We have Rob, and Rob, I've never actually learned to pronounce your name right, but Otriembiak. Did I get it?
Very nearly.
Thanks.
That's why I put Robbo in the chat. That's what people call me.
Oh, thank you. Patty, well, thank you. Liberum is lucky to get you. You are so sweet. Welcome, Patty. Glad that you're here today. Patty's coming with us from Department of Licensing. And we have Nicole from Braun Northwest, HR manager. Already said hi to Jason. Steve Smith, also a Liberum consultant. Howdy, Steve. Steve and I have a long history of working together. Coming at you from Eastern Washington. So anybody in the house from the east side of the Washington state, give yourself a big welcome. I always got to give a shout out to my local peeps. Brittany, OCM, and here for networking and knowledge. Awesome. We have Jerry from Ecology, Brian from WashDOT, OCM consultant. Hi, Brian. Let's see, Samantha, Rachel's here. Who else we got? Rebecca from Liberum's here. Project management side of the house. Hi, Rebecca. Noemi. All right, we have some healthcare authority folks in the house. So again, thank you so much for being here. I know week to week, day to day, your life is probably busy, as all of our lives are. So taking a little reprieve to talk about a topic of interest is, I think personally, a way to kind of get my juices flowing, kind of get me re-engaged with the thinking and the knowledge sharing, being with peers. So we're happy that you're here today. Little bit about what we got in store for you. So this is our second help lab. So I'm going to give a little personal testimony. I've only been with Liberum for a year. It's actually been 1 year, I think, this month. One of the reasons why I came to Liberum is the values that I hold dear. I believe in providing excellent customer service and I love that Librum's not such a big consulting firm that they lose the focus on the client and the customer. And one of the values that really drew me to Librum was the fact that we try to leave clients, communities, the people that we get to work with better off, right? So we want to be able to touch lives and improve and leave that footprint and that legacy. So I am super happy to be here on behalf of Librum with my peers who are just amazing people. Every time I step in the space with them, I learn something new, and I'm hoping you enjoy the time together here today too. So this is, I think, Samantha, just our second help lab.
Yep.
So one of the topics that have come up, right, is working with sponsors can be kind of challenging sometimes, to say the least. So we're here to learn together and kind of share that space. We're going to start off by getting a little bit of your perspective, having a little fun with it, share a little bit about Librum's beliefs that are kind of a platform for our practices, right? The foundation, talk about the sponsor's role. And then what's really cool is we have tools and tips and tricks to share, and then free time to open it up for any challenges you might be experiencing that you want to kind of talk about and dialogue about. On the slide that you will see a little toolkit icon, that means we got a tool for you, a handout, something that we can share. So you can hone in on that on the slide, and I'm sure we can drop those in the chat window and or make them available to you after the session. With that, let's talk a little bit about your perspective. So I really like to try to create a welcoming space. Not everybody likes to talk in groups, especially if you're new to the space. So we try to create multiple ways for you to engage. So do not let technology ever be a deterrent to your active participation. We're going to ask you some questions. Today we're using a little Mentimeter. Hands up, anybody use Mentimeter? I am in love with it. It's a way to kind of pull out interaction from people who might be a little bit more quiet. It's pretty fun. Awesome. I got a couple people familiar with that. So we'll do a little bit of that. But if you don't want to use Mentimeter, don't use Mentimeter. Don't let the technology impede your participation. You can use your chat to post questions or comments, raise your hand, and we'll call on you. Let's just make this a really great space. I also want to encourage you to share. So again, we have some exceptional OCM practitioners that you get to hear from today. I am also a firm believer that you're here for a reason, which means you have experience of your own to share and draw from in your own learning. So we are here to make this learning environment together. So we'll encourage you to share what you've learned on your journey as well. With that, I'm going to move us to our first mentee. So having a little fun with it. So on your slide, you see the first mentee. There's a couple ways you can participate. One of those ways, I'm going to post in the chat window. You can just follow that link right through and participate that way, or you can pull up your phone and go to menti.com and type in that code 8977-4503 to participate. I'll give you a minute to do that. And your first question, which of the following best depicts your experience working with project sponsors? First one, and all of it's okay. Sponsor, what's that? I never even worked with a sponsor. Or nothing but love. It's just a love fest. We get along great. Actually, my sponsor's my best friend. Or it's like herding cats. Anybody been there with the project team? Exhausted, right? You're just tired. It's a solid partnership. How about other? You ain't got any of the flavors that I want to communicate, so I'm just going to say other. How much time you got? Scarred for life. So that was Samantha. We were talking about this. She said, crying in the corner. I like to refer to those as adverse professional experiences. I think my friend Steve in the room is familiar with that term. They make you cry. Or meh, it's just not a big deal. It's another day in the office. So I'm getting a little bit of herding cats, right? I think that's a reality of busy sponsors in a busy, busy world. Trying to get them to engage and be active might be a challenge. Some of you are exhausted. I get that too. Some of you, how much time you got? If you want to kind of put a little explanation in the chat window, that feedback would be welcome too. All right, next mentee. I would be really surprised if you said never had a challenge working with a sponsor, right? So my question for you is, what do you find most challenging working with sponsors? Is there something of particular interest you're wanting to explore that you find particularly challenging? Misalignment between what they say and do. Okay. Coming in mid-project, so managing transitions in a project and staffing changes, especially going to happen on longer term projects, right? Staffing comes in and out, roles change. Won't or can't be hands-on. So I remember working for an organization, the sponsor had something like, I think 10 different projects this person was the sponsor for. Like, who in their right mind can handle that many and do that great of a job being a sponsor on any one of them when you have that many? So that's definitely a reality. Communicating expectations and responsibilities, explaining value of projects, so kind of helping keep that up front of stakeholders, the value, the purpose. Showing up when you don't need them, okay, and not being around when you do, okay. Not having time to perform the role, okay. Their time availability to be active and visible. So I think we're going to talk about some of these challenges today, give you some tools and tips and tricks to make working with sponsors maybe a little bit easier, and then we are going to open it up for dialogue at the end and dive into some questions together. So thank you for participating. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Samantha, who's going to talk a little bit about what Liberum believes and values.
Thank you, Stacy. Can you all hear me okay? Do you see me turn purple?
Yeah, we got you.
Thank you. My camera does that from time to time. If someone can name that character from Willy Wonka, I will send you a candy bar. So we thought it would be helpful to dig in, since we're hosting a whole lab around sponsors. What is it that Liberum believes around positive? Rob, you are so good. I'm going to send you one of those milkshakes. Brittany, you're right on it. So we thought it would be helpful to dig in to what we believe about good sponsor behaviors. So we have a couple slides here. I want to keep the engagement going. So if you have comments or questions, plunk them in the chat. And with that, let's dig into the first one. So the first behavior is they create alignment. So for us, this is all about breaking down silos. You don't have a project team consisting only of people whose opinions align right with the sponsor, and they're guarding that kind of like perception around the project. They are actively seeking out diverse perspectives and opinions. The other siloing thing that we want them to break down is organizationally. So if you're on a project or a change initiative that is its own island, and the sponsor never really connects that with the larger vision and goal or goals for the agency, that can result in failure because it's not really a piece of the puzzle for the larger organization. The second behavior or attribute of an excellent sponsor is they communicate well. And it's not just, I sent an email once a month, so I'm a good communicator. They understand their audience, right? So they are digging into the audience motivation, how they need to hear the message, different methods of talking to them, relaying information, and they're speaking exactly to what people need to hear to feel engaged with that change. The third one, so this to me, and I want you to chime in on the chat if you believe this also, this is make or break. So if that individual is able to demonstrate transparency and be vulnerable with people and say, that workshop, that go live, our schedule didn't go as planned. Something happened, it wasn't according to what we said was going to happen, what we believed and planned for. But this is how we're going to fix it. If you have a sponsor that can do no wrong and is really unable to share what isn't working on the project, it's really hard for people to trust. And I will dig into that question, Patty, in just a minute. Thank you. So I think it's easy for sponsors to celebrate what's working. We hit a milestone, we have a major accomplishment. Let's talk about it, send out positive emails. But if they can't, on the flip side, also take responsibility and communicate what might not be working very well, folks are going to have a hard time believing what their direction is moving forward. Do you all agree with that? Can I get thumbs up or any comments on that concept? All right, next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so continuing on, number 4, they review progress and support the project team. So great sponsors aren't just going to leave it to the project manager to know what our major milestones are and whether or not we're making progress. They need to have a good concept of the landscape so they can remove barriers as needed, right? And the final one, they demonstrate commitment. So as leaders, don't you kind of feel like they're kind of the flight attendant on the plane? Everybody's watching them to see if they're really engaged, really a proponent of the change or the project that's happening. And if they start to look nervous or doubtful, it's hard for other folks to get on board. So you really want a sponsor who can walk the talk and show up and create that support with the people around them. Any questions on what we've shared? Okay, and Patty for number 2. So her question was, are you expecting the sponsor to figure out how the audience needs to hear the message, dig into audience motivation, or is that our role as OCM? Ideally, you have both. So I think OCM and the readiness activities that we do, when you get to know the culture of an organization and the different pockets of culture that exist, you're going to have a sense of what might work for communication. Ideally, your sponsor is aware enough of those dynamics within the organization to also highlight that. So that's like best case scenario. If they're unable or kind of don't read that context, then it's definitely more work for OCM. All right. Stacy, I think we have another mentee.
Yeah, for this one, I just wanted to open it up for a little bit of conversation. So I know many of you have insights to share and offer. So let's just pause. And what have you learned in terms of behaviors and of a sponsor that you value, kind of principles of practice? What have you learned that works? In a minute, you can also use your chat. Have you seen a sponsor behavior or action that you thought, man, that works so well, that you'd highlight? Transparency and champion of project. Great. I might not be pronouncing this right. Is it Shatrina? Shatrina? Shatrina?
Yep, that's me.
Okay, awesome. Would you care to share, is there any specific thing that you've seen a sponsor do to champion? Like, what would that look like if you could see the behavior?
So it's funny because I work in the IT department and a lot of projects seem to get coined as like IT projects, even though we're only here to service our customers, which are the rest of the business. And so, you know, when they really talk to the benefits, you know, the impact that this is going to make on their folks, kind of some of the long-term goals, short-term goals, and really helping set the stage. I don't expect them to be like the people managers to really help carry out exactly how it impacts each group, but having that visibility and that platform to be able to do that is really important. And then I would say continuing to do that, right? Because I think the other side of it is it happens up front and then it doesn't really, you know, communications don't continue. And so it can get a little stale. So.
Great. Great. Thanks for sharing. Let's see, we got some other comments in the chat. Interested in learning enough about the project that they can speak to it, like investing, right? Investing some time and energy to actually to know it. That's another great point. Let's see, Jeremiah. Working with the sponsor who took the time to engage. I like that you're calling out with the team too, right? So sometimes over the course of a project, a team can get tired. Anybody seen that or feel it? And sometimes needing that sponsor to come in and give encouragement is great. Contact with other stakeholders, right? Overall buy-in, that's great. just present and accessible. See, Jerry, connected to the entire team. There's that team concept again. Being interested in learning why people have barriers to the path that the organization wants to go. So investing in the people, that's awesome. Willing to use talking points and stay on message. Good practical tip, Rob. I've seen sponsors do either or, like we give them talking points and then they interpret them and reimagine them the way that they need to speak to them, and it's turned out great. And others that have been like really holding true to it. I've seen both of those. They can work well in different situations, either one of those approach. That's great. Any other final sharing that anybody would like to speak to? Right. Thank you for participating. We're going to hand it over. I think Reagan's next. And then again, make sure you're posting your questions. And then we'll have some time at the end to dive into those as well. Okay. Is this you, Reagan?
I think so, yes.
All right.
So we're going to talk about the role and then really talk about other key players that are also part of that transformation project. Or when you think about the product owner, the project manager, solution architects, the other group that actually makes up the governance structure. I'll share with you a few things that I like to do on the front end, and I'll speak from a PM role and I'll speak from an OCM role in terms of what I think could be helpful in that sense. So let's flip to the next one. This is a pretty simplistic slide of a structure. When we start thinking about, whether it's an IT transformation, whether it's a merger acquisition type transformation going on, you typically have that steering committee at the top that is really the North Star, that's really driving the business case while we're here, and also making sure that we stay the path. The project goals, the project objectives are aligned to those overall business projects and goals. The executive sponsor is cushioned in between the core team and the steering committee. Now, and you can see the core team below are representative or members from project management, OCM, those doing testing, data conversion, each of the impacted business work streams, the architect, solution, data architects as well, and then those system admin. So when you think about that project core team that's meeting day in and day out each day, doing sprints, doing retros, doing huddles each day, that's that core team. Now, one of the things that I think one of the biggest positive things that you can do, especially from a PM perspective, is I don't wait for it, but if you can get the steering or the executive sponsor, get the OCM, PM, and the product owner, get those together. That's the four-legged stool, in my opinion, of early on getting them on the same page of what do we expect? What do we hope to achieve? What do we hope to accomplish? And more importantly, what's the roles and responsibilities of those four people? Because if you think about it, everything drives through those four people. When you think about training, you think about testing, you think about maintaining the project schedule, project plan. The product owner's got to make the solution decisions. They've got to drive requirements, approve requirements, all that good stuff. I think getting those four people in a room early and talking through just sort of what are the expectations moving forward. And a lot of governance structures will put that out, but they don't get granular enough. They just say, well, manage the transformation. Well, what does that mean? Manage the work stream. What does that mean? So we really want to get as much clarity as you can on the front end with those four individuals. As an OCM person, you may be saying, well, I can see the PM, but I don't need to do that. Well, I think you could introduce that, the value of that, and why that could be important if you have a PM or an sponsor or a product owner that's green, that maybe is naive, that's maybe new. Because oftentimes, at least I found, we could have almost a Sunday school series for the next 2 months of every scenario that tends to happen. You have a sponsor that's done this before 10 times. You have a sponsor that's never done this before. You have a steering committee that's never served on a steering committee. You have a project manager that just took his PMP certification as this is his first project or her first project. So you never know where they are with their experience. So as OCM, I think it's important if you're seeing that missing in the governance structure, bring it up. You may not have to drive it, but I think it's important to bring that up. Or partner with the PM and you guys can kind of push that to the sponsor. You'll get on projects where the sponsor and steering committee are tenured, they're experienced, they've done multiple transformations, and you're going to get on some that are much less experienced and are struggling, and they tend to just kind of hide within the, the paperwork that's published. This is how we're going to do things, but operationally, it's not really fleshed out, so to speak. So my 2 cents from an OCM and PM perspective, but think about those 4 people moving forward, the PM, the OCM, product owner, and the executive sponsor. Get to the dinner table with those folks as quick as you can at the beginning of the transformation. All right, what's the next slide? All right. This isn't an exhaustive list. It's what we think are important traits and behaviors of each of these groups. Because a lot of times there's confusion, what's the difference in the steering committee and what's the difference in the executive sponsor. So just very quickly, steering committee sets monthly, build out weekly, quarterly, budgets, roadmaps, strategic priorities. Executive sponsor, look at this one. This one came up a while ago. I think one of you guys put as a challenge. Take ownership of the tool, okay? And the return on the investment. If you're going to invest $10-15 million in Salesforce, take ownership of that. And what does that look like? Why is that important to the business or to the department? And we also have collaborate closely with PM and OCM is a big one as well. And then you have some sponsors that just sort of would rather sort of hide behind the curtain, but you want a voice piece. And I think the steering committee and executive sponsor can be really good voice pieces. Be the spokesperson, be the evangelist, even the steering committee. I like to see them get involved in some things as well, whether it's town halls, whether it's sending out communications, doing fireside chats, things of that nature. But you can sort of see the difference. And then the project core team is that day-to-day, as we talked about, you're in huddles, you're in sprints and all that good stuff. And we have a question. Shatrina, is that HCA as in Healthcare Corporation of America?
Healthcare Authority.
Oh, okay, never mind. I was about to say I spent years at HCA, so I was about to say a few things, but no, go ahead. You had a question?
Just a funny question. I still only see the agenda. It sounds like I'm guessing other people can see the presentation, so I might just need to drop and rejoin if it's just me.
Oh my gosh, let's check in on folks. You should see roles and responsibilities slide.
This is Jerry. I've got roles and responsibilities slide.
You do? Okay. I'll just leave and come back.
So sorry, Chatrina.
It's fine.
Technology.
No, we've been having challenges with Teams last couple days, so I'll be right back.
No worries.
I don't want to read each one of these to you, but is there thoughts on these roles and sort of how they mix, but also they can get blurred? Any challenges or thoughts around those? And it probably goes back to what I mentioned a few minutes ago. Each project is going to be composed of members that could have a lot of experience versus less experience. So I think OCM can bring that glue and vision to help pull it together with the project manager as well.
Reagan, I can chime in on something. So when you're talking about the experience level, I think it's been really helpful in the past for me to watch the steering committee, watch like a session or two I typically do one-on-ones with them as I'm starting on a project, but to identify who the really strong leaders on the project are and kind of help them coach the other folks, like lead by example. Here's what I would love to see you do. The folks that are new or kind of shy about taking their reins and being really active proponents.
Yeah, and when you get in those meetings, what I've noticed is those that have seen this movie before, that's what I typically say, they're going to jump up and they're going to say, hey, yes, let me participate in that communication rollout, Reagan. Or, hey, yes, we need to have, this bi-weekly meeting to discuss this, or I like this type of, you'll see those folks typically jump up, but I think it is great for them to mentor each other, or they can see through participation in activities, through the more tenured folks, they can sort of just take their lead from them as well.
Awesome, Reagan, thank you. And y'all keep put, Stacy, I'm a talker, sorry.
So my sister, go for it.
I just went for it.
Yeah. There you go.
So keep posting comments, questions in the chat. We're keeping an eye on that. So the whole purpose really, and Stacy touched on this, Liberum does these help labs to offer some resources, tools, and reference to how this could work for you in the work that you do day to day. Because I know it's pretty difficult. And the majority of our team came from the public sector, working in state government, quite a few of us trying to do OCM with very little resources, or sometimes as like the one person in a 1,000+ employee organization. So one of the things that we try and do is take some of the tools that we're finding helpful on projects and change initiatives, modify them a little bit so you can play with them and apply them as works best for you. So we're going to dig into 3 different items. So next slide, please. This one's my favorite and it's so simple, right? It's simple. Why is it always the simple stuff? So the sponsor roadmap, I use this on every single project. It is a checklist. Honestly, it's nothing more complicated or glamorous than a checklist for your sponsors to know what they need to be doing month to month. So typically what I'll do at the start of a project is I'll fill this puppy out for the length of the project. And we talk about, here's what successful sponsorship behaviors look like in action. And I'm going to give you 3 categories. So on the left-hand side, we have decision-making and approvals. We have project engagements, and we have staff communications. So anything falling into those buckets that I need the sponsor to pay attention to and to deliver on is going to be on this checklist. Then when we meet, and there should be a cadence to that of some type, maybe it's sponsor and OCM one-on-one, maybe it's sponsor PM and OCM, however you have that structured, go through this every time. So like Jerry, when I was at Ecology with you all, I would sit down with our 3 sponsors. We had 3 sponsors, and everybody would have a line item on what they were doing that particular month. We revisited this weekly, so there was a lot of edits and changes as we were having them do different things, send out newsletters, tracking decisions, that kind of thing. But it really is simple, and it's calming for sponsors to see, oh, this is what you expect of me. Because we can talk all day theoretically about like what good sponsorship, which is really just good leadership, looks like. But to give me a checklist of what I actually need to do is incredibly helpful. So we'll give this to you in a Word version so you can play with it. Next slide.
Hey, Samantha, you got a question from Patty.
Yeah, Patty, I do. So typically I will put recurring items on my OCM plan. So it'll lay out, and I'm always trying to document really, really clearly, to Reagan's point, who does what within those plans. So you're going to see me bugging you for X, Y, Z through the life of this project as sponsor. Steering committee, I'm going to have you do blah, blah, blah. And this is how I support you in doing those behaviors. I'm probably writing the speaking notes. I might be, typing up the draft email or creating the newsletter content, and I feed it to them, but there's clarity within my plans and through revisitation and use of this of what I'm asking them to do. Yeah, I will put them on your calendar, Jerry. Whether you want me to or not. Awesome. Any other questions on this? Cool. All right, next one. Coaching. So how many of you, by show of hands or just throw something in the chat, do you believe that you're a coach in the work that you do? Absolutely, Jerry, that's awesome. So we could be OCM consultants, we could be program managers. Anytime you're within an organization, you're probably coaching in some direction or another, right? So during change, moments of change, projects, major initiatives, being really intentional about how you're helping a sponsor show up is all about coaching. So what we pulled together, this is a 2-page document that kind of walks you through the process of, first off, you notice something's not working, right? You have that like aha moment. My example of this is I watched a sponsor who had all the best intentions in the world, just use a hammer to get people to deliver on something on the project when a hammer wasn't needed. And I was thinking, I don't know if that's motivating for people, because I watched an entire team shut down when that person did that. So this document is going to walk you through when you notice a gap, what do you do? How do you help build rapport with that sponsor and kind of draw out of them, what kind of leader do you want to be? Because ultimately people are showing up the way that they think is most effective, and it could be landing completely differently, right? That hammer shuts people down instead of getting them to really engage with and trust the project and follow sponsor direction. And then it's going to walk you through how you can coach them to kind of draw out, here's what I'm seeing, and here's an opportunity for you to show up differently. So essentially what you want to do, and Rob is brilliant at this. Rob is a really excellent coach. So I learned some stuff from you, Rob, when you were with Liberum, but you're drawing out of them the motivation, how they want to show up, and you're giving them opportunities to apply a different behavior and pointing out how it's successful. So that's the first page. The second page has 3 archetypes that you've probably run into, and how you can coach them to kind of bring out the best in them. So let us know what you think after you take a look at the tools and if they're helpful or if you have any other questions. And we've got one more to share. Next slide. Jerry, that's dead on. Yeah. They'll say change is awesome. And then they're like, oh, it's change. What am I doing? So the last one is what Liberum believes about effective sponsorship that we covered, a few slides back, but this time we added some actual tips for action. So when you look at the concept of creating alignment, what does that look like in action? What kind of behavior do you want to see from the sponsor? So another reference document. Any question on these tools? And we'll share them after this session today. Cool. Stacy, I'll stop talking now.
Oh, please don't. So this is kind of our open segment for the day. So really it's just a what's on your mind regarding sponsors. We have multiple people in the room that we can kind of tap into, and as well as, the experience you all bring. So let's enter into some conversations. So questions you have about the tools or anything shared, or maybe a challenge that you're experiencing, the stuff that has you perplexed. What you got? Hashtag Trotter Talks. Samantha. She does. She really does, Jerry. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm glad you made it back in too.
And yes, I can see the slides now, which is great.
Unfortunately, on a one big project that I'm working on, it's kind of what I was saying, where we had really great executive sponsorship up front, and I'm seeing now, as the rubber hits the road per se, that as we're getting closer, we're like 6 months out from implementation, there's a building of anxiety, and so we have our executive sponsor, we have a sponsor, and the sponsors are the ones that, yeah, really are having some challenges, I think, grasping the totality of the project and really fully understanding everything it means to their folks. And so they're having a difficult time kind of trying to resolve some of those concerns. And then it equates into, well, why don't you guys just give a bunch of demos? Let's just keep doing 90-minute demos over the next month. And it's like, 90-minute demo takes about 6 hours to prepare for. So, and it's difficult then from a project perspective to try and meet that need, and just how do we build some additional confidence, and how can I help coach kind of those mid-range sponsors to provide more championship around it.
Hey, Shatrina, so can you elaborate a little bit? You said it's specific to like the scope or level of impact it's going to have on people. Are they just now going, oh, wait, this is a bigger change than I thought?
Yeah, and for this particular sponsor I'm referring to, it impacts a good deal of their staff. So about 85 people in their particular division, and it probably impacts 60 of them in a pretty real way. And so I think what's been happening, I think my expectation was, as part of the steering committee and as part of the regular updates, and we have sponsor meetings, that they would have been disseminating that information all along to their staff. But I think there was an expectation that the project team should do that. And when we say things like, here's some talking points, they're like, well, you already know what we would need to say, so go ahead and deliver that. That sounds great.
Yeah. Okay. I can speak a little bit. I see Reagan, you went off mute also. I'm going to share a couple ideas I have, and then I'll hand it over to you. I told you guys I talk a lot. But I've had this happen where it's kind of been like a who's on first thing, and the sponsors backed up and said, well, if you're writing a communication, why don't you go ahead and send it? Because so a couple of thoughts on approach, and I would love other Liberum folks or anybody on here, honestly, to chime in with what's worked for you in the chat too. First off, I reiterate for them why it needs to come from their level. So there's really concrete data around the importance of sharing executive vision for a change, and why that positional authority carries more weight when you're trying to share a communication than if I did it as an OCM resource on the project. The second thing that came to mind is simplifying the message as much as possible. So you find a way for the sponsor to clearly and accurately explain what's happening and why, and even make it visual if you can. So here's what's coming up. Here's who's impacted. Here's what you're going to see. Here's how we're going to support you. Like really like laying out the path for them so they can't screw up the messaging or just go off the cuff, or kind of back into oh, I don't know if it's going to work either. If they start to panic and then do that common enemy intimacy thing that Brene Brown talks about and start commiserating with people, you want them to be above that and have enough of an understanding to be able to say, here's what's happening and why. So I would be packaging stuff up and helping them understand their role and the importance of it. And we can talk more offline too, and I'll stop talking. Reagan?
That's something I've seen that's lived out and seems to be accurate, is employees are okay hearing about the change at this level from executives, but how it impacts their daily work and their paycheck, they'd rather hear from you being their supervisor. So it's important to get both communicating a message, but as a consultant or a PM or whatever, I think it's important that those stakeholder groups that are impacted, that a change champion from each of those groups can speak to the changes coming and can cool temperatures and calm people about the type of change that's coming and speak to the benefits of the change. I don't want a CEO speak into a group in customer service in a call center about how their handle time is going to go down. First of all, they don't know. So it needs to be really communicated to those that are actually managing the groups that are going to be impacted the most.
Other
Reading their
perspectives?
comments, they're so on point.
Other questions? Sharings people would like to offer?
So yeah, this is Jerry. I would just like to input that I've been involved in a couple of different projects where project management or executive management or sponsors, whatever you want to call them, were either highly involved and had really bought off on the project, and the project was wildly successful. They were making the communications. In fact, people didn't even know people like Sam Trotter existed because it was coming from executive management. And middle management bought off on it, which meant the worker bees bought off on it. I've also been involved with a certain project that the sponsors, the project manager, the steering committee were all on board in the beginning and disappeared partway through the project. And Sam knows which project I'm talking about. And people ended up we're still paying for the effects of that. And it wasn't anything that the OCM manager could have fixed because that was brick walls. They, once the sponsorship walked away, it meant the worker bees were having to do what they needed to do, and they were absolutely filling in the gaps with a lot of negative stuff, and we're still paying for that. So if you can keep your sponsorship and your steering committee involved and sending out those messages that you need them to send out, you're going to be 100% better off.
Yeah, a disengaged sponsor is kind of terrifying. There's a lot of negative impact that goes with that. Thanks, Jerry.
Great, great feedback in the chat window. Make sure you're kind of checking that out. Patty, thanks for your comments. And now they want back in. I love my four-leggeds, but boy, do they test my patience. So, Shatrina, what do you think the primary motivation for resistance is regarding the sponsor not taking the time to deliver those messages?
I would say it's probably a combination of lack of understanding and lack of confidence, because the solution that we're putting forward, like I said, has a big impact, and there's it's a very complicated solution. There's a lot of business rules and things, and so they get asked questions then that they can't answer, and I think then that creates a little bit of fear of looking like, yeah, they don't know exactly the full extent of it, but they don't have to answer all those questions. And I would encourage them then to bring those to the project team to get answered, really collect those questions and say, it's a great question and I'll follow up with it. So I think that's a big portion of it.
So a lot of those things, and Samantha has written the book on this. So if you guys talk offline, she can go into it deep, but specifically around those is if they're receptive to it, spending some one-on-one time with them in between things to help educate them and do that in a very closed environment, like one-on-one, to bolster their understanding and their confidence levels up. And then typically we've seen that they take a more active forward-facing role in that. But it does take time out of your day, to take the time to get them up to that level. But it tends to work out though, where you build a lot of trust with them. they get more confident, they're a better sponsor, you have now a better sponsor, so on and so forth. So it's from my experience, it's time well spent.
Good point. Thank you. Am I the only one with difficult sponsors? That's easy.
No, you're the only one that's brave enough to talk about them.
Well, I'm like right in the middle of it and was, I think at 11 o'clock, I was talking about the OCM strategy and where concerns were. So it's just very fresh and top of mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think most leaders don't know how to do this, right? Like we kind of, especially what I witnessed in state government, and I think this is pretty typical, but you kind of have this trajectory in your career where I got promoted because I am technically astute and I know all the rules and regulations. I know how to do the day-to-day. And then you gave me a team of people. The first time I had a team of people, my manager was like, lady, you got to learn how to work through other humans. And I was like, fine. Am I good at it? I don't know if I'm great at it yet. But we kind of put people in these roles to lead others, and sponsorship is really leadership, right? It's really out in front leadership through a certain event, but they don't always know like how to show up in that space. So yeah, you are not alone.
People, right? People are complicated. That's what makes the work so interesting. So I think we're closing up on time. We did want to get your perspective on maybe something that you've liked, something that you learned, something that you wish, you think, or that you plan to maybe do or use moving forward. So if you can take a minute or two to give us some feedback in the chat. And also know that there's a wealth of people in the room that are happy to be of assistance to you outside of this call. It sounds like pretty much everybody already knows Samantha, so maybe drop emails or how they can reach out to us after the session, but by all means, keep questions coming. We would definitely love your feedback, and then we'll end with a slide to get your feedback on what other topics you'd like to explore. And I'd reiterate what Samantha said. I love it when people are willing to come into a space with some people who are strangers to them and just engage and share and learn. So just thanks for speaking up and using your chat. It's awesome.
I just want to say thanks for hosting this. So yeah, I have been interested. I was talking to Jen about it as well. So yeah, definitely very informative, and it's kind of you all to provide that level of support. So thank you.
Our pleasure. We're all trying to do the same thing, right? Make stuff better. So we're happy to do that.
And how about the last Menti, and then you have like maybe 5 minutes to transition to your next meeting? What additional topics would you like to explore? So I think the commitment is that we continue to do these health labs so long as you all find them useful. So we would love to bring you topics that you want to learn more about and share more about. So if you can take a minute, you don't have to use the Menti if you don't want. You can just drop it in the chat. But other topics we'd also welcome your thoughts on, so we can prepare for the next one. With that, anything else, Samantha, you'd like to say in closing?
No, I just appreciate the input, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're happy to help you. We can talk about this stuff all day. We're kind of geeks about it. So please do reach out if you have other thoughts or questions.
Communication is the hot topic coming in on Menti. If you have any other thoughts, drop them in there or in the chat. And then our contact information, so you have emails. Feel free to reach out, pick up the phone, give us a call. And thanks for being here today. Brittany has a question. How to get more practice when you aren't in a formal OCM role?
Oh, is that a topic for a future lab, Brittany?
Or is it a question?
A little bit of both. Yeah, that was, I meant it as a future for
Okay,
us OCM
gotcha.
wannabes, how to kind of get that practice in so that we can, be a little bit not only more useful, but also just marketable, really. So.
Great topics.
Yeah, I think in addition to that, we're in one of those positions where we have two change management folks for what do we have now? 1,600 employees, 13 different divisions, and so many initiatives that we can't possibly get across it all. Obviously, there's consulting services available, which is fantastic, but just kind of understanding, yeah, how to fill some of that gap occasionally, or when you have a big project and you do have a resource, but they're only available about 5 hours a week.
Oh, like it's the other duties as assigned type of resource where it's in addition to the day job. Man,
Or
yeah.
it's just, yeah, or just somebody that spreads so thin. Yeah, how to leverage the best, looking at the best opportunities in those situations.
That's awesome. Okay, great idea.
Yep, great. There's some great topics for next go around in here. We hope you have a wonderful day. Happy October, almost in November already. Yeesh, time flies. So thanks again for being here, and we hope to see you next time. Talk to you later.
Thank you so much. So good to see all of you.
Bye,
Thanks so
everybody.
much. Great seeing you.
Thanks for joining us, Patty.
Well, I put about 5 suggestions in there, so.
Good.
Patty.
Good. That's awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, have a great day.